Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. The American people are rightly horrified and outraged at the mass murders we have seen over and over again. Both at Parkland and at Sutherland Springs 4 months ago. Both of those murders were preventable and should have been prevented. In my judgment, we have seen a catastrophic and systemic failure of law enforcement at every level. Mr. Bowditch, with regard to Parkland, do you agree that the FBI committed serious, grave errors?
Yes, sir, I do.
We know now that on September 24th, 2017, a man tipped off the FBI that this shooter had posted on YouTube a message saying, quote, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter." And yet the FBI was not able to track down and identify that person. We know that subsequently on January 5th, 2018, another caller described this shooter as someone who wants to kill people. And yet in that instance, the FBI did not even open an investigation on it. Why not?
Senator, I share your frustration, I share your anger, and I share your concern that this doesn't happen again. Why not is what we're getting to by our inspection teams. We have one team from the Counterterrorism Division that's looked at the Jackson incident, the Guardian lead, and how that was handled. The second team is out in was out in West Virginia, and they're finalizing their reports now, that looked at the call center. In the Jackson incident, there were two potential options available to us. One was, had the investigators, after they went out to interview the caller, had they decided to submit what's called a 2702 letter. It is not a compulsory process, but it is a letter where we go out to the provider and we ask for IP address information. Had they done that,
did they have the poster's name?
They had the name only, yes.
Did they Google that name?
Yes, Senator. Well, I don't know if they Googled it. We know he conducted open source searches. We're still working through the audit trail the best we can.
Did they have the location where the shooter was?
We did not, sir. What we did, what the investigators did find, and the investigators, to be clear, are both part of the Joint Terrorism Task Force at the time. One was an FBI agent, one was a local task force officer assigned to the JTTF. They went out, they interviewed the caller. At one point, they conducted social media checks, or open source checks, rather. They also conducted database checks. When they did, they found another Guardian lead from our Houston office. In that Guardian lead, the way they found it was the term school shooter came up. The agent called an agent directly in Houston, and they had a discussion about this. And what happened in Houston was the term school shooter was used as part of a joke on social media. So they washed that complaint out. There was nothing to that. That was not related to Mr. Cruz. The agent had the option to write a letter or to file a 2702 letter with the provider. The provider then has the option to come back to us and say, here's the IP address or not. If they choose not to, the second option could have been going to the U.S. Attorney's Office to try to seek a grand jury subpoena to compel.
But the FBI, these two complaints didn't connect the two. Is that correct?
We did not connect between the call center and the Jackson Guardian?
Correct.
Yes, sir. Actually, we did, but that was not done until January the 5th. On January the 5th, when our call taker received that call in West Virginia, she obviously received the information. She then conducted database checks. As she did so, she found another Guardian complaint, which was the one from September, which was sent to Jackson, Mississippi. That complaint had initially come in through our ETIP line, and the employee did what they should have done. They sent it down to Jackson. You agreed
at the outset that the FBI had made serious mistakes.
I believe there were judgments made.
Has anyone been held accountable? Has anyone been reprimanded? Has anyone been terminated?
Senator, it's a good question, and the answer is these employees have due process like everyone else.
So the answer is no.
As of today, no. However,
Have the systems changed?
we have an Office of Personal
Have
Responsibility.
the systems changed?
Some of the recommendations have been bridged, yes, Senator. So the inspection team made a number of
Would
recommendations.
you agree that local law enforcement likewise had systemic catastrophic failure? CNN reported there were 45 calls to the Broward County Sheriff's Department about this individual.
Sir, I don't believe that's my job to talk about another agency's performance.
You're in law enforcement, you work with local law enforcement, 45 calls, complaints about fighting, throwing his mother against a wall, abusing animals, and local law enforcement didn't do anything. Is that a systemic failure?
Sir, having been a local law enforcement officer before I came into the FBI, those calls are all day and all night. I don't know the context of how
Four armed
those calls
officers
came.
remaining outside and not going in and engaging the shooter. Is that a failure of law enforcement? Is that consistent with FBI protocol?
I think I'll let the public and the Broward County Sheriff's Department
Is
make
that
that
consistent
decision.
with FBI protocol?
It is not.
Thank you.